Firstly, pause on the Game of Thrones and watch this video. Grade 10s, I've really been enjoying the last couple of weeks that I've been teaching my kids. We've been doing Quadratic Equation. I thought, well, let me come spill some news to you. Because what I'm about to teach you is something that's going to go with you all the way to matric. So tune in, we're about to talk Quadratic Equation. Right, so as we know, equations, we've got the one side equal to the other side. Now all of a sudden it's quadratic. Well, what makes it quadratic? Well, I'm going to show you over here. This is the form of a quadratic equation. We've got ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. What I'm really talking about here is the square here. That's what makes it a quadratic equation, and that's what we need to pay attention to. So all of a sudden, it's starting to seem like something we've seen before. Because where have we seen this before? In a trinomial. But now all of a sudden it's in the form of an equation. So how do we solve something like this? Well, there are 3 simple steps to solving a quadratic equation. Step number 1, make the right-hand side or left-hand side equal to 0. Once we've done that, we need to factorize. So just based on the first 2 steps, quadratic equations look quite tricky when we look at them, but now that we know how to break it down, it becomes a lot easier. So now we know, make the right-hand side equal to 0, or the left-hand side. I prefer that, but we make the right-hand side equal to 0. Next step, factorize. You know how to factorize, and once we factorize, it's then going to become a lot easier because then all we need to do is solve for x. And with a quadratic equation, there are always 2, not 1, but 2 values for x. So let's get stuck into one of these. So all of a sudden you come into class and the sum is on the board and it says x squared is equal to 6x. Now based on those 3 rules that I posted up on the video as I started, step number 1 says you make the right-hand side equal to 0. Now I'm going to choose the right-hand side here because if I chose the left-hand side, that means I'm going to take my x squared over and it's going to become negative. And we know that we do not like to deal with negative x's. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my 6x across to this side so that my right-hand side is now equal to 0. So what I do, I've got x squared minus 6x is equal to 0. Alright, I've done step number 1. What is step number 2? Factorize. Well, the first thing that they say you should always use is find the common factor. Well, is this a common factor? It is. It's not the difference of 2 squares because 6 is not a perfect square and neither is the x. So what I do, I take out a common factor of x. That leaves you x squared divided by x is just x, and 6x, negative 6x divided by x is going to give me minus 6 is equal to 0. Now, we said there's always going to be 2, not 1, but 2 values of x that we're going to find. Now, based on equations, we know that we're trying to make the left-hand side equal to the right-hand side. Now, the right-hand side is 0. So that means that whatever happens over here, whichever value we find of x, when multiplied together, this needs to be equal to 0. So that means, what can this x be in order, when multiplied against this bracket, be equal to 0? And there's only one answer to that, and that is 0. So we now know that x can be equal to 0 in order for this to stand true. Now, what about this bracket? What can this bracket be in order to make this side equal to 0? Well, what minus 6 would be 0? Because if we can make this bracket 0, whatever this value is over here, if we multiply it in, anything times 0 is 0. So all I have to do is, I'll do the basic step first. I can say x minus 6 is equal to 0. Solve for that, so x is equal to 6. And that makes sense, because 6 minus 6 is 0. And x times 0 is going to be 0. So if we substituted the value of 0 into this sum over here, just to make sense for you, I'll have 0 times 0 minus 6, so 0 times negative 6, which is 0. Or if I pumped in 6 into this equation, I'd have 6 times, what is 6 minus 6? 0. So 6 times 0 is 0. So it makes sense. And that's just the start. Wait for the next one. Okay, so another example, just to make sure we get this whole thing really wrapped up. And I've tried to mix it up here for you. So first things first, what did I say about when we're solving for a quadratic? We know it's a quadratic because we got the square. It's there for us to see. So let's take everything over so we can make it equal to 0. So we're going to say 3x squared plus 3x, take it over, minus 18 is equal to 0. Now all of a sudden, I've got a trinomial. Okay, but we know that we never like to have a coefficient of that x squared. So we always must try, we always got to give it a go to see if we can take this coefficient out as a common factor. And luckily, we can take it out as a common factor because 3 goes into 3 here, and it goes into 18. So I take it out. So I'm just going to do it in a different color. So I'm going to take out that 3, and now I'm left with x squared, alright, plus x, because 3 divided by 3 is going to give me 1. So just plus x minus 6 is equal to 0. Now, I don't want this 3 here. So what am I going to do? I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Now remember, I can say 0 divided by 3, but I can't say a whole number divided by 0, because what happens then? It's undefined. So this is fine, because 0 divided by 3 remains 0, but it allows us to cancel out those 3's that we don't want, because we're trying to solve for x here. So now all of a sudden, I'm left with x squared plus x minus 6 is equal to 0. Trinomial. We need to factorize. We've made the right-hand side equal to 0. We now need to factorize. So I've got a trinomial. I open up my two brackets, equal to 0. Based on our trinomial video, check it out if you can't remember how to do this. But if I've got a minus sign, if I've got a minus, my c is minus, it means I'm going to have a minus and a plus, because that's the only way we can make a negative. A negative times a negative gives you positive, so it has to be a negative times a positive. Now, if my c is negative and my b is positive, it means the bigger number we use has to be positive. So what's the way to make 6? I'm going to use 2 and 3, because that's the only way I'm going to get this 1 over here, the difference of 1. So that means that my 3 needs to be positive, because my b is positive. So it's going to be x minus 2, x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now each of these brackets, at their stage, needs to be equal to 0. So what do? I say that x is going to be equal to 2, or x is equal to negative 3. And that makes sense. Why? Because if I substitute these values in, if I substitute 2 in, this bracket is going to become 0, because 2 minus 2 is 0. 2 plus 3 is 5, but 0 times 5 will give me the 0. Using the other one, I've got negative 3. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5. But this bracket here, negative 3 plus 3 is 0. When I multiply them together, I'm going to get 0. So these are my two solutions. X is equal to 2, or x can be equal to negative 3. That's why it's a quadratic. Two solutions to my sum. Okay, so in maths, it's all about application. How we take the skills we taught and then apply them in a maths test. And our teachers, they're wise people. They're not going to give you stuff you've trained with in class. They're going to hope that you've learned the skill, and now if you see something different, you don't panic. You remain calm. You just focus on the steps that we've taught you. That's all you need to do. Don't be so stressed. So now all of a sudden I'm showing you something, doesn't look like the normal stuff we've been doing. But we don't panic. We just say to ourselves, he's just taking us to the next step. So what we need to do here is that we know if we can make this bracket equal to 0, alright, then we know the whole thing will be 0 and it'll be true. And that would be one of the values of x. If we were to make this bracket over here somehow equal to 0, that would be perfect, because then our whole equation would ring true again. And this multiplied together would be 0, which is what we're looking for. So once we've found these two brackets, as you've seen in the previous examples, that's all we need, because then we say that 2x, and I'll do the slow one, plus 5 is equal to 0, or, and I'll use a different color here, or 8x minus 3 is equal to 0. All we do is, you've seen this before, this is grade 8 equations. So now I've got 2x is equal to negative 5, so x is equal to negative 5 over 2, or 8x is equal to 3, which means that x is equal to 3 over 8. And those are my two options. So my final answer is going to be x is equal to negative 5 over 2, or my x can be equal to 3 over 8. There we have it. Two solutions, nice and easy. Don't panic. Stick with what we've taught you. Good luck. And please don't forget, if you've enjoyed these videos, click like below, and also ask us some questions in the comment section, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get involved with your mathematics. We're that tutor at home for you. When you're sitting there, don't know what to do, pop a little question in there. And don't forget, subscribe. Cheers.